Have you ever won but felt like you lost? Pushed yourself to the absolute limit to claim a prize, only to look at the cost and wonder, was it worth it? That devastating feeling, that hollow triumph, it's a concept so powerful it has its own name. A name that echoes down from the dust and blood of an ancient Italian battlefield. We're talking about a Pyrrhic victory. You might have heard the term. Maybe in a history class, a political debate, or a business meeting. But where did it come from? What does it really mean? It's more than just a costly win. It's a fundamental lesson in strategy, ambition, and the brutal mathematics of sacrifice. Today we journey back to 279 BC, to a place called Asculum, where two mighty armies clashed in a storm of bronze, iron, and elephants. We'll meet a king whose name became synonymous with winning the battle but losing the war. This is the story of Pyrrhus of Epirus, the Roman legions he fought, and the victory that doomed him. This is the Battle of Asculum, Pyrrhic Victory explained. Welcome everyone. To truly understand the weight of a Pyrrhic victory, we can't just define it, we must live it. We must smell the sweat of the phalanx, hear the roar of the legionaries, and feel the desperate gamble of a king who staked everything on a single throw of the dice. The story isn't just about tactics and casualties. It's about the peril of short-term thinking, the illusion of success, and how the pursuit of glory can blind even the most brilliant minds to the creeping shadow of ruin. Our stage is the early 3rd century BC. The Mediterranean world is a chessboard of rising and falling powers. In the West, a new player is emerging with terrifying speed and discipline, the Roman Republic. No longer just a local power in central Italy, Rome's ambitions are expanding, bringing it into conflict with the Greek colonies that dot the southern coast of the peninsula, in a region known as Magna Graecia. These cities, rich and cultured, look east for help, and their plea finds a receptive ear in one of the most fascinating military adventurers of the ancient world, King Pyrrhus of Epirus. Pyrrhus was a relative and lifelong emulator of Alexander the Great. He was, by all accounts, a brilliant tactical innovator and a fearless warrior, a man of boundless ambition, as the historian Plutarch called him. He dreamed of carving out an empire in the west to rival those of Alexander's successors in the east. When the city of Tarentum called for aid against Rome, Pyrrhus saw not a duty, but an opportunity. A gateway to immortality. He crossed the Adriatic Sea with an army of professional Greek soldiers, a corps of Macedonian-style phalangites, elite Thessalian cavalry, and a weapon that would strike terror into Italian hearts: war elephants. His first encounter with Rome at Heraclea in 280 BC was a shocking success for the Romans' new enemy. The legions had never faced elephants, these living tanks, and were routed. But Roman resilience was also something new to Pyrrhus. They refused to negotiate from a position of weakness. So the war continued, and it led to a second, even more gruesome confrontation the following year. This would be the decisive clash, the one that would give its name to a specific kind of tragedy. The stage was set near Asculum. Before we dive into the carnage, we need to understand the pieces on the board. This wasn't just a brawl, it was a clash of military philosophies. On one side, Pyrrhus and his Hellenistic army. Think of it as a precision instrument, a professional combined arms force, the phalanx, the corps, men armed with the sarissa, a pike up to 21 feet long. In a tight formation, called a synaspismos, they presented a terrifying, impenetrable forest of spear points. Their strength was frontal, overwhelming force in open ground. Their weakness was a lack of flexibility. Once committed, they were hard to maneuver, and rough terrain broke their cohesion. The cavalry, mainly from Thessaly, considered the best in the Greek world. They were the hammer to the phalanx's anvil, used to flank, pursue broken enemies, and deliver decisive charges. The elephants, the ancient world's weapons of mass disruption. armored, with towers holding archers or javelin throwers on their backs. They could smash through infantry lines, trample men, and most importantly, terrify horses and soldiers who had never seen them. Allied Italian contingents, Samnites, Lucanians, and other local tribes who opposed Rome. They were fierce fighters, but less disciplined than Pyrrhus's core troops. On the other side, the Roman Republican Legion. Think of it as a resilient, adaptable system. It was a citizen militia, but one hardened by decades of near-constant warfare. The manipular legion. This was Rome's genius. They had moved away from the dense Greek phalanx. Their army was divided into lines of maniples, literally handfuls, small, flexible units of 120 men. They were spaced apart, allowing for relief and maneuver. The triplex aces, the famous triple line, the young poor hastati in front, the prime-of-life princeps in the second, and the veteran triarii in the rear, whose presence signaled a desperate fight. "It has come to the triarii," was a Roman saying for a last stand. This system allowed exhausted frontline units to fall back through the gaps and be replaced by fresh troops, a grinding, wearing-down machine. The pilum and gladius, each legionary carried 2 heavy javelins, pila. On command, a volley of these would be thrown to soften the enemy line, the soft iron shanks bending on impact to disable shields. Then they closed with the short, thrusting gladius sword, perfect for fighting in tight spaces. This combination of missile attack and close-quarters combat was devastating. Roman discipline and morale. This was their ultimate weapon. The Roman soldier fought not for a king's glory, but for the Republic, res publica, for his comrades, commilitones, and for shared spoils. Their ability to absorb staggering losses and remain in the field was unmatched. Pyrrhus, the master of Hellenistic warfare, was facing a military organism that was evolving in real time to counter him. He had won at Heraclea, but he had not broken Rome's will. Asculum would be the test of which system, the specialized elite army or the resilient citizen system, would prevail in a brutal, head-on contest. The armies met in a valley near Asculum, but the terrain was initially unfavorable for Pyrrhus. The Romans occupied a strong position on wooded, broken ground that disrupted the phalanx and nullified his cavalry and elephants. For 2 days, the armies skirmished and maneuvered, each commander probing for an advantage. Pyrrhus, ever the tactician, realized he needed to draw the Romans onto flat, open ground where his heavy units could operate. He feigned a retreat, offering battle on a plain of his choosing. The Romans, confident from their improved performance and perhaps eager to finish the job, took the bait. They followed. Now, on the chosen field, Pyrrhus could deploy his full might. The battle lines formed, stretching for miles. Ancient sources tell us it was a colossal engagement. Pyrrhus placed his phalanx in the center, his cavalry on the wings, and his elephants held in reserve. Crucially, he anticipated the Roman advantage in infantry flexibility. His innovation? He interspersed units of his lighter Italian allies between the blocks of his Macedonian phalanx. The idea was brilliant. The flexible Italian troops could counter the manipular tactics of the Romans, while the solid phalanx blocks provided an unbreakable anchor. It was a hybrid formation designed specifically to counter the legion. The Romans faced him with their 3 lines, likely placing their own allied cavalry on the flanks, wary of Pyrrhus's superior horse. The battle opened. The silence was shattered by war cries, trumpets, and the thunderous rhythmic tread of the advancing phalanx, a sound described as the grinding of gears in some terrible machine. The Romans advanced in their more fluid, checkerboard pattern. When the lines met, the sound must have been horrific. The crash of wood and metal, the shouts of men, the screams of the wounded. Initially, Pyrrhus's hybrid formation worked exactly as planned. Where the Roman maniples tried to exploit gaps, they were met by the agile Italian troops. The phalanx held firm, its long sarisse keeping the legionaries with their shorter swords at bay. The fighting in the center descended into a brutal shoving match, a test of sheer endurance and courage. Meanwhile, on the flanks, the superior Thessalian cavalry began to gain the upper hand, pushing back the Roman horse. Seeing an opportunity, Pyrrhus committed his reserve, the elephants. The great beasts, their hides armored, towers bristling with missiles, lumbered forward. The ground shook. As at Heraclea, the effect was initially catastrophic. The Roman cavalry horses, smelling and seeing these monsters, panicked. They bolted, throwing their riders and disrupting the lines. The elephants ploughed into the Roman infantry, trampling men and scattering formations. It seemed like the breaking point, but here we see the crucial difference between the armies at Heraclea and at Asculum. The Romans had learned. They had spent a year thinking about the elephant problem, and they had developed countermeasures. From the Roman lines, a new type of unit advanced, the anti-Eleon corps. We don't know the exact details, but ancient sources describe wagons or chariots equipped with long beams, swinging tridents, and pots of burning pitch or tallow. These were moved against the elephants. More importantly, Roman light troops, velites, unleashed a hail of javelins specifically aimed at the elephants' drivers and the sensitive skin around their eyes and feet. The tide of the elephant charge slowed, then turned. Wounded and enraged, some of the elephants began to panic, turning back into their own lines, causing chaos in Pyrrhus's ranks. The Roman infantry, displaying that incredible discipline, reformed their lines. The battle, which had seemed on the verge of a decisive rout, stabilized into a grueling, meat-grinding stalemate. The fighting raged until nightfall. As darkness fell, both armies, utterly spent, bloodied and exhausted, disengaged and retreated to their camps. There was no singing of victory paeans, no chasing of a broken foe, just the grim silence of survivors tending to the mountains of wounded and dying under the cover of night. The dawn of the next day revealed the horrifying cost. Ancient casualty figures are notoriously unreliable, but they paint a clear picture of disproportionate suffering. The Roman historian Dionysius of Halicarnassus claimed the Romans lost 6,000 men. Pyrrhus's losses were lower in number, perhaps around 3,500, but they were catastrophic in quality. Here lies the heart of the Pyrrhic victory. Pyrrhus had held the field. By the technical, tactical definition of ancient warfare, he was the victor. The Romans withdrew first. He could claim Asculum as a win. His camp celebrated, but the celebration was muted. Why? Because those 3,500 men he lost were not easily replaceable. They were the core of his army. His professional Macedonian phalangites, his elite Thessalian cavalry officers, his trusted commanders and friends who had followed him across the sea. These were not conscripts he could recruit from the Italian countryside. They were specialists, veterans of his previous campaigns, the very instrument of his power and ambition. Each one lost was a blow to the army's spine, a permanent reduction in his ability to fight another day. The Romans, on the other hand, had lost more men in total, but their system was built for resilience. Though 6,000 were citizen soldiers, the Republic could call up new legions from its population of loyal citizens and allies. The loss was a deep wound, but not a fatal one to the Roman military machine. Their political will, famously, remained unbroken. They would not sue for peace. The story goes that after the battle, one of Pyrrhus's companions congratulated him on his victory. Pyrrhus, surveying the field of his dead friends and the shattered remnants of his finest troops, replied with the immortal words, "If we are victorious in one more battle with the Romans, we shall be utterly ruined. One more such victory, and I am lost." That is the essence of it. He had won the immediate contest, but in doing so, he had degraded his own capacity to win the war. He had traded his irreplaceable strategic capital for a piece of tactical real estate that brought him no closer to his ultimate goal of defeating Rome. The victory at Asculum, rather than opening the road to Rome, closed off Pyrrhus's path to ultimate success. He was now trapped in Italy, his army bleeding away, facing an enemy that seemed to grow stronger with each defeat. This is the Pyrrhic victory, a success that inflicts such a devastating toll on the victor that it negates or outweighs the benefits of winning. It's not just a costly win, it's a win that makes further progress impossible, that cripples the winner's long-term position. It's winning the battle in a way that guarantees you will lose the war. What happened next? Pyrrhus, ever restless, would fight on in Sicily for a few years before returning to Italy for one final futile clash with Rome. He would eventually leave Italy, his grand western adventure a failure, and meet his death in a petty street fight in Argos. His epitaph was written not in conquered territories, but in a dictionary. Rome, tempered in the fires of its conflicts with Pyrrhus, emerged stronger. They had faced and survived the best military mind and army of the Hellenistic age. They had adapted to elephants, studied the phalanx, and proven their citizen soldiers could stand against professional warriors. The war with Pyrrhus was a brutal graduate school for the Roman legions, hardening them for the even greater conflicts with Carthage that lay ahead. But the true legacy of Asculum is the concept itself. The term Pyrrhic victory transcends its ancient origins. It's a lens through which we can analyze countless events. In war, the British at the Battle of Bunker Hill in the American Revolution. They took the hill, but at a catastrophic loss of officers, sapping their strength for the wider campaign. In business, a company that engages in a brutal price war, driving a competitor out of business, but in the process destroying its own profit margins and brand value, leaving it vulnerable to a new, healthier entrant. In politics, a party that goes to extreme, divisive lengths to win an election, succeeding but in the process alienating so much of the population and damaging institutions that governing effectively becomes impossible. In personal life, winning an argument with a loved one by saying the most hurtful thing possible. You win the point, but at the cost of the relationship's trust and health. A Pyrrhic victory is the triumph of short-term thinking over long-term strategy. It's the pursuit of a goal without regard for the cost of achieving it. It is, in many ways, the story of hubris, of believing so strongly in your own strength and destiny that you fail to see the slow, inevitable draining of your resources until it is too late. So, what can we learn from Pyrrhus on that bloody field at Asculum? His story is a masterclass in strategic thinking, or rather, the lack of it. First, define what victory actually means. For Pyrrhus, was victory holding a field after a battle, or was it the conquest of Rome? He confused the milestone for the destination. True victory is achieving your strategic objective, not just winning an engagement. We must always ask, what is the true end goal, and does this fight actually bring me closer to it? Second, understand your capital and your opponents. Pyrrhus's capital was his small professional army. Rome's capital was its vast, resilient human and political system. He was spending gold coins. They were spending copper. In any conflict, you must audit your resources. What are you spending that is irreplaceable? Time, reputation, trust, key personnel? If you're exhausting a finite resource to fight an opponent who draws on a renewable one, you are on the path to a Pyrrhic victory, no matter how many tactical wins you score. Finally, recognize the point of diminishing returns. There is a moment in every conflict where the cost of the next increment of gain becomes exorbitant. The genius commander, the wise leader, the prudent person knows when to stop pushing, when to disengage, when to seek a different path. Pyrrhus, for all his brilliance, could not do this. After Asculum, he was trapped by his own initial victory. He had invested too much to walk away, but winning had become impossible. He was caught in a tragic loop. The Battle of Asculum, therefore, is not just a historical event. It's a cautionary tale etched in the annals of human conflict. It reminds us that not all victories are created equal. Some wins are seeds for future growth. Others are the last, beautiful bloom before the winter sets in. To avoid a Pyrrhic victory, we must have the wisdom to look beyond the immediate prize and see the long, shadowy path of consequences that follows it. The echoes of Asculum are all around us, in boardrooms, in politics, in our daily choices. The next time you find yourself in a struggle, big or small, pause and ask Pyrrhus's question, what will this victory cost me? And can I afford it? If you found this deep dive into history and strategy valuable, if you enjoy seeing how lessons from the ancient world can illuminate our modern lives, then hit that like button. It really helps the channel. And if you haven't already, subscribe and ring the notification bell. We explore the stories, battles, and ideas that shaped our world, making them relevant and understandable. Now I'd love to hear from you in the comments below. Can you think of a modern example of a Pyrrhic victory, in business, in a film, in history, after the ancient world? Where have you seen someone win the battle but lose the war? Let's discuss. Thanks for watching. Until next time, remember, not all triumphs are sweet. Some are bitter enough to give their name to defeat.